Now, welcome to Hood Champion Boxing and Sports. In boxing, you find a way to win, or you find a way to lose. Would Terence Crawford have beat Hearns? Thomas the Hitman Hearns is the question. Now make sure you like and subscribe. Become a member to the channel. Give me a follow on Twitter and Instagram and leave that donation for that fried rice and chicken wings. Let's get some things clear here, right? Terence Crawford is a bad boy. And everybody now want to talk about Crawford would have beat Sugar Ray Robertson. Shit, Crawford would have beat Jack Johnson. Crawford would have had white women. He would have rode a horse. Would have beat Sugar Ray Leonard. Probably could have beat Ali, beat Larry Holmes. Hey, look. Terence Crawford is a bad boy. But somebody got to hold their horses and stop taking it to the stupid. Now with Thomas Hearns, how would a fight really go between Crawford and Thomas Hearns? Because Crawford often gets compared to Thomas Hearns when you talk about the physical attributes. But let me put some things in perspective here. Crawford and Thomas Hearns, there is nothing similar about them. We're talking about physical attributes. Let me just get y'all up to speed. Look, let's just start with the basics, all right? Thomas Hearns, that joke was 6'1", like 6'1 and a half. 78-inch reach. That is freakish for the frame that he had. That is crazy. And this is a welterweight. And of course, you know he bubbled up and everything. Then you look at Terence Crawford, 5'8", 74-inch reach. Now, he's given up 5 inches in height, 4 inches in reach. And you guys want to come out here and just say Terence Crawford would have knocked out Thomas the Hitman Hearns, and how Thomas the Hitman Hearns would have never stood a chance. I understand what Terence Crawford did with Canelo, but the advantages that Crawford had over Canelo, as far as reach, not necessarily height, Hearns had those advantages and more over Crawford. Now, this shit about Hearns, right? Because some people are just saying, he's just taller and longer. That doesn't mean nothing. No, it does. Because that height and reach, when he was in the ring, that wasn't something cosmetic that just looked good. No, that shit was used to be tactical. Thomas the Hitman Hearns was like a sniper. Everything he did when it comes to his length was like being a sniper. Having that rifle, putting you in the line of sight, boom, and getting you up out of there. Couldn't make me believe, right? In the first couple rounds, Terence Crawford had to be very, very careful to not get sniped by Thomas the Hitman Hearns. He had no problem, just like Crawford has no problem keeping opponents at bay with his jab. Thomas Hearns had no problems keeping opponents at bay with probably one of the greatest jabs in boxing history. So how would Crawford do against somebody with a 4-inch reach advantage, 5-inch height advantage? How does he do against that? Let's understand something. Crawford, I like Crawford, and we're just having a conversation. But since everybody want to act like Crawford can go out here and kick King Kong and Godzilla's ass, I said, all right, cool. I mean, I enjoy those little jokes, but somebody was really, going at me, Hood champion, Crawford would beat Thomas Hearns. I have no problem with saying Crawford is today's Tommy Hearns because tall, lanky, got power, dark skin and shit. I could understand the comparison. I mean, that doesn't mean they're the same fighter, but I get it. When you come out here talking about Crawford would knock out Thomas Hearns, I'm like, yo, let's frame this argument properly. Now that I just put that shit on your brain, what you think now? And again, Crawford, he's tall, he's long, he's lanky, but he ain't Thomas Hearns tall, long, lanky at all. But Crawford would be forced to fight uphill from the opening bell. That shit wouldn't be easy for Crawford at all. Everybody talk about Crawford power in both hands. He's a switch hitter. You're right. You're absolutely correct. Crawford and Hearns are talking about two great fighters. Crawford going down in the history books. Okay? But Hearns had that terrifying power too. It's just hard for me to believe that he wouldn't be able to land that shit early in the fight against Terence Crawford. That right hand is like a missile. He launched that shit to detonate on your chin, your ass is out of there. And he carried the knockout force from 147 all the way up to where? Cruiserweight. Isn't that kind of where they're trying to push Terence Crawford? But we know Terence Crawford can't go up to cruiserweight and do that shit. Again, the frames are different. But the power that Hitman had, the durability, the chin, that grit, you know what I'm saying? It's a totally different animal we're talking about. When you start talking about that era, man, the Four Horsemen, y'all gotta put more respect on these guys' names, man. Most of y'all ain't never watched none of these guys fight. Leonard, Duran, Hagler, Hearns, you just out here talking out your ass. Now, don't get me wrong. Crawford, it would be an interesting fight. That's why we're having this conversation. But when people are just out here, man, not even wanting to acknowledge the greatness of a guy like Thomas Hearns and just basically just shutting down any conversations about him having a good chance to clip Crawford. Y'all don't want to hear that shit. Don't get me wrong. Crawford has pop. He has pop. He stopped Spence, stopped Porter, did the business to Brook. But Crawford's more, I think he's more surgical. Hearns is more explosive. Hearns get in the fight with one clean shot. One clean shot, that shit's over. Y'all talk about the size of Crawford's hands. Y'all see the size of Hearns' hands? Even, you see his hands? That joker got some big-ass hands, man. Him and Crawford. The dude's got bear claws, man. But I just think with Hearns, he hit Crawford one time, the shit's over. Where Crawford more needs an accumulation of shots to really take effect and get opponents out of there, unless you're a guy like Evanescence. But if they would have fought, Hearns would like to turn that shit into a firefight. I mean, green light go. First bell, ding ding, green light go, all gas, no brakes. Hearns is looking to turn that shit into a firefight. And in a firefight, listen, you know who wins that shit. Because Hearns had the power. Crawford wouldn't last in a firefight with Hearns. Very simple. But now we're talking about conditioning and shit, right? You look at Terence Crawford, man. Now, both fighters are known for elite conditioning. This is the thing. You got to go back and watch Hearns fight, but do your research. But now Crawford has gone 12 rounds multiple times without fading, okay? Hearns, despite his lanky frame, he had solid stamina, though he'd fade late against Sugar Ray Leonard. And in a couple other fights, you know, he kind of slowed just enough for the opponent to get an upper hand. But I just think in them early rounds, if Crawford can somehow survive them early rounds, I think his gas tank will become a weapon for sure. But Hearns, he rarely let fights go long. The longer the fight went, the better for Crawford, because you got to give Crawford credit when it comes to that stamina. He probably has the edge, but when it comes to that power, you got to get that edge to Thomas Hearns. Now, speed. Listen. Crawford's got deceptive speed. Okay, he really does. You're watching Crawford and looking simple. You're watching him in exchanges and you're looking and you're seeing the hands go, but it just ain't nothing flashy about it. He doesn't look that fast, but his hands are fast as hell. His hand speed is elite. You got to give him credit for that. And his ability to explode mid-combination is unmatched in today's game. Hearns had fast hands too, but his speed was linear. Crawford is more angular. You know what I'm saying? In close quarters, this is where Crawford, he might edge Hearns in speed. Plus, Hearn had a 78 goddamn inch reach. But when it comes to the range, or Crawford likes to, establish that distance management, Hearns' jab and that 1-2 would dominate. And Crawford would have to figure something out. And moving around the ring wouldn't be enough. So when it comes to that speed, they both have speed, but definitely in close, Crawford would have the upper hand. At a distance where Crawford likes to be, it'd be all bad for him. Now, the footwork, Crawford and Hearns, they both have great footwork, man, you know what I'm saying? But Crawford's footwork is on a whole nother level. Hearns had great footwork too. But if you watch Crawford, just like in the Canelo fight, but I know most of y'all follow Crawford. You know what Crawford can do, but you just see him kind of gliding, pivoting, resetting. I mean, Crawford just coasting around it like a ghost. You know what I'm saying? Cat-like feet. Just, you don't even realize he's where he's at because it's just so effortless the way that man moves. But when you look at Thomas Hearns, he was more upright, more linear. His foot placement was more precise. He was always setting his feet to land them hard shots on you. That's a difference. But Crawford's ability to change angles will be the key to trying to neutralize Hearns' reach and Hearns' foot positioning, because everything with Hearns was just positioning his feet, setting his feet to launch that missile. You know what I'm saying? But I just think with Crawford's angles and being able to turn opponents, I don't know if Hearns would ever really be able to get a chance to set his feet the way he wants, to detonate that right hand on Terence Crawford's chin. But we got to understand something when we're talking about footwork, Hearns' ability to control distance could make Crawford movement irrelevant if Hearns could keep Crawford on the outside. Because Crawford can't do shit if he's on the outside against a guy like Hearns. He got to be very careful, very careful. Because if he try to come inside, Hearns take a little half a step back and bing, bing. Crawford turned to a Puerto Rican dancing salsa in the ring, looking crazy, equilibrium all off. Or he's knocked out cold. And when you talk about head movement, right? Thomas Hearns' head movement, Crawford's head movement. Crawford's head movement is subtle, but it's very effective. Even saw with Canelo. Crawford's on the inside, he slipped, bing, bing. Hit Canelo with some hard combinations, spun Canelo's ass around. Canelo was sitting there trying to say to himself, how did that happen? How did I let this guy land that shit on me? Crawford slips, rolls, counters with precision. All that was on display when he fought Canelo this past weekend. But Hearns relied more on range than head movement. Hearns wasn't really a guy trying to get cute in the ring. He was just about that distance management, keeping you on the end of those shots, and unloading on you. But I'd say in exchanges, Crawford would be harder to hit clean. I do believe that because Crawford is really good with his defense is underrated. But the thing again, you come back to Hearns, he didn't need to land often. He just needed one shot. And that's why I'm not saying that defense wasn't important to him, but the offense was more his defense. You know what I'm saying? Because if he landed on you, up out of there. Then as far as who had the better ring IQ, Crawford or Hearns? I mean, both of them guys were geniuses, you know what I'm saying? Crawford still is, Hearns was. That's why they get so much respect. You watch Crawford, he's like a chess master, you know what I'm saying? He out there, man, and everything is chess. He's downloading opponents, dismantling them. They never knew what hit them. They end up ring with Crawford. Next thing you know, Crawford's here, he's there, he's hitting them. All of a sudden, these guys are losing the fight. And they're like, how the hell how do we reach this point? And when it come to Hearns, he was a tactician with a killer instinct. That was the difference. Hearns was always looking to get you out of there. He wasn't looking to soften you up, nothing. No, he's green light, go, all gas, no brakes. Kill, kill, kill. And that's one of the biggest differences. So I think Crawford might have the edge in adaptability, but Hearns was a master of control. IQ is pretty even, but I think they express it differently. I just think that Hearns just had that shit in him. All that moving around Crawford would be doing, Hearns would be like, I think Hearns would be taking risks. He'd be going after him. He believed in his power. So when they come to that ring IQ, they both possessed it, but I don't think Hearns would allow Crawford to do the things that Crawford wants to do. I think Hearns would be on his ass. That's what I think. And smartly, too. Now, when it comes to grit, look, Crawford shown grit against Porter. Kavaliauskas binged him. Against Spence, he didn't have to show much grit because after before they ended the first round, you could see the direction that fight was going to go. But he's been hurt, man. But he always responds with violence. You hurt Crawford, he's going to come back. And he's coming back to take your ass out. Where Thomas Hearns, he showed grit against Hagler, Leonard, Barkley, even in defeat. He always showed grit. He always showed that he wasn't going to go down without a fight. But that's what you get when you talk about a Terence Crawford and you talk about a Thomas Hearns. Both men are warriors. Neither one of them going to fold. You got to kill them. But the fight between both of them, I think it'll be a test of wills. But I honestly feel if Thomas Hearns land on Crawford, Crawford will be up out of there. But one thing for sure is Thomas Hearns is so aggressive that maybe Crawford makes him miss and makes him pay, especially chopping on that body. You know what I'm saying? When it comes to aggression, look, if you got somebody who's on the front foot and that's how they like to fight the fight, more than likely they're the aggressor in the match. And Hearns was a front foot killer. Crawford's more like a reactive assassin, you know what I'm saying? Hearns would press early, no doubt, step to Crawford. And Crawford asked him, he'd have to move around. But I think Crawford would try to use that against Hearns, try to bait him in, try to counter. I just think the clash of styles will be electric. Aggression favors Hearns, but only if Crawford lets him dictate the pace. And I think them early rounds will be all Hearns. That 78-inch reach, boy, ain't no joke. Impatience. Crawford is patient to a fault. You know what I'm saying? He waits, studies, then he strikes. Hearns was more urgent. So in a long fight, Crawford's patience could frustrate Hearns. But if Hearns lands early, patience becomes a liability because he's going to be on you. So the longer you wait to make a decision on what you want to do, probably too late because Hearns probably already done touched your bing bing and put your lights up. Now, this whole thing about switch hitting, everybody talks about switch hitting. Look, Crawford started off training orthodox, and now he fights southpaw. He can fight orthodox just as effective, but that just lets you know Crawford probably is the best switch hitter in boxing history. They got a lot of guys who can do it, but not to the extent as Terence Crawford. He flows between orthodox and southpaw seamlessly. With Thomas Hearns, he never faced a switch hitter like Crawford. And again, like they say, you're facing a guy like Crawford, you got to prepare for two people because once he switches, you're fighting a different person. But this could be Crawford's secret weapon, you know what I'm saying? Disrupt Hearns' rhythm and jab and timing with the switching. So that would be interesting, just how switch hitting would actually play into the fight. Then preparation and strategy. You got to look at Bomac and the team. They got their shit together. But Crawford's team, Bomac and Red, and everyone else who helps out, they are elite strategists. They do the business, man, and come up with amazing game plans. And that's why Crawford is, pretty much unpredictable in the ring, and he's undefeated. But then Hearns had Emmanuel Stewart, one of the greatest minds in boxing. So both camps will come in with a really good game plan. Crawford would aim to survive early and drown Hearns late. And Hearns would aim to dominate early and finish before rounds 6, 7, or 8. Stewart go tell him to go knock that MF out. And that's exactly how I think the fight would go, would be Hearns press, foot on the gas trying to knock out Crawford. Then Bomac tell him just be smart. We're going to get this MF for late. And would it get beyond round 6? I don't know. But that would be a really, really good fight, just seeing how the battle of the minds of the trainers and the strategies and how the fighters are able to implement them. Now, this shit about sparring. Look, Crawford spars killers, okay? He spars a little bit of everybody. Of course, Shakir and Keyshawn go in there. He sparred Lester Martinez, and he has a lot of good sparring partners. I've seen the clip of him sparring Carlos Adames and putting the bing-bings on Adames. But when it comes to Hearns and that damn Kronk Gym, man, they sparred legends in the Kronk Gym. I talk about Canelo being in many wars in his camp. That shit they're doing in the Kronk Gym was a whole nother level, man. So the bottom line, both camps are elite. I kind of give the edge to Thomas Hearns, but I just think both men would be razor sharp going into a fight against each other. Now, the money demands, this is where it gets interesting. You know, Crawford is a $50 million fighter right now. But we're talking prime for prime. Hearn in his prime, he was a pay-per-view pioneer. People wanted to see him. But right now, in today's market, we're talking about today's market, I think Crawford would demand more. He would demand more, but Hearn would sell more. Because, again, people want to see knockouts. So it will be interesting, but if they came together, it was sure as hell be a mega event. But money wouldn't affect preparation. Both men, they both fought for legacy. Well, one fought for legacy, one's fighting for legacy. He wants his money too, but he's all about his legacy. So it would be a really, really good fight. Neither one would give up an inch. So if you say, all right, we hear all that, you talk to all this shit about speed, power, IQ, strategy, teams, everything. Round by round, how do you think it goes? Well, I mean, if I were to break it down round by round, I mean, early rounds is all Hearn, you know. There's nothing to think about here. Hearns would dominate with the jab and reach. Crawford would struggle to find his rhythm. He could get his ass knocked out. So I think Hearns wins probably all 4 rounds. I think he knocks him out. But if for some reason he doesn't, he'll be up 4-0. Then the mid-rounds, this is where Crawford will start adjusting. Switching stances, begins to land counters. Hearns slows slightly. It's a couple even rounds, but Crawford starts touching that body, that long torso. He starts touching that body. Between rounds 9 through 12, this is where you can see Crawford surge because he has that expanded gas tank. Hearn will still be trying to knock him out, but at this point he could have put so much effort into getting Crawford out of there early that maybe Hearn starts to fade a little bit. Crawford's body work and angles start to take over. Next you know, rounds 9 through 12, Crawford's back in the fight. And if it goes to a decision, judges only remember, you know, what they saw last, and you could see where it's very, you know, razor close. But maybe Hearn wins on the scorecards if he banks the early rounds, especially if he drops Crawford. But Crawford could win late if he survives the storm. But if Hearn lands clean early, Crawford may not see round 6, so it will be a really interesting fight. But for y'all fans out there talking like Crawford would just go and knock out Hearns and knock out Leonard and knock out Hagler and knock out Duran, why don't you go knock yourself out with your bullshit? Crawford's a bad boy. But these guys that came before him, that's a different level of animal instinct. Different level of killer instinct. It's just a different type of beast in those guys, man. Guys, if you said their name, they wanted to fight you. They didn't care. Make the fight. They wanted to prove they were better than you. Different climate, man. But it's always fun to talk about. We'll never know. But it's always fun to talk about. But if you ask me, you say, all right, you give us this little 22, 23-minute breakdown. Okay, who do you think will win? I think Thomas Hearns would knock out Crawford. That's just me. I think within 3 rounds, Crawford would have his ass knocked out cold. Y'all gonna say hell no, but hey, just my opinion. You disagree with me? Leave your comments. Leave your opinion and your rebuttals in the comments of the video section, all right? Time for me to go chill. I got to get up and go fishing with my sons tomorrow. Y'all keep cool. Shout out to the veterans 7 continents. Become a member to the channel. Leave that donation for that fried rice and chicken wings in the breeze.